Welcome back. Well, there's a series of by-elections underway today, but there is a focus on one particular ward in Kwa-Nobuhle in Nelson Mandela Bay in the Eastern Cape. It's the first time that Action SA is challenging for a seat in the Eastern Cape. And outside of Gauteng, it has a small presence in KwaZulu-Natal, but in Gauteng, of course, is where it was formed. You remember how Herman Mashaba's party had a relatively decent showing in Joburg, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni during the local elections last year. Wayne Sussman's an election expert. He joins us now. Wayne, good afternoon to you. I mean, in a way, quite a big day. How tricky is this going to be for Action SA to win a seat in a place they've never campaigned in before?
Thank you, Stephen. There are a few factors. Obviously, when we think of Action SA, the name of Herman Mashaba looms very, very large. But we've got to remember the leader of Action SA in the Eastern Cape, or the most dominant figure for Action SA in the Eastern Cape, is the former mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, Athol Trollip. So are we going to see Athol Trollip and Herman Mashaba and the idea of Action SA take Action SA to a very respectable finish in today's by-election? That's the million-dollar question. We know that Athol Trollip has always been a figure who's loomed large in Eastern Cape politics, even though it's a province which is dominated by the ANC. He was leader of the opposition for the DA there for many, many years, a former mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, this white man who speaks Xhosa fluently. Today we'll see whether he was held back in the DA and whether in an Eastern Cape by-election, Athol Trollip in a new party with a young, impressive candidate can shake up not just Nelson Mandela Bay politics, but possibly Eastern Cape politics and even national politics.
It seems to me that if I were the party strategists at the DA or the ANC, I would work very hard to keep Action SA out here, even to try and relegate them to third place, just to make sure they don't get a hold.
Correct. Well, the DA are not contesting here. The EFF is the party which has come second here. They came second here in 2021. Don't want to go off on a tangent, but they actually won the seat in 2016 because the ANC failed to register a candidate. So it's a very important election for the ANC and the EFF and Eastern Cape parties like the UDM. You do not want Action SA to get a foothold, because let's just remind the viewers, the first by-election which Action SA contested, they finished in second place. They pipped the Freedom Front, which was traditionally the second biggest party in that ward in north of Pretoria. So that was a very good result for Action SA. Then we went to Soweto, where Action SA wanted to get in the 30%, but they finished third behind the EFF. They still did well, they increased. So they've shown that they can grow in places like northern Pretoria, which are traditional DA strongholds. They've shown that they have appeal and can attract voters in places like Soweto. Can they today go to Kariga, formerly Uitenhage, in the township of Kwa-Nobuhle, and make an impact there? That would be an encouraging sign. I would say at this stage, looking at past results, the EFF are probably still favoured to finish second place. But this is a big day for Action SA, as you say.
I don't think that Action SA is the only, I put this in inverted commas, new political party. One person who used to work for a bank has a book out called Manifesto. I think he may be running for office. There are other people, of course, who are doing similar things. Could this also be an indicator for other people who may enter our politics? And I say this because I get the sense that we could have quite a few new parties coming in before 2024.
Correct. There is another Green Party which uses the color green, which wasn't as new as Action SA, which did very well in the 2021 elections. That's Patriotic Alliance. Today they are defending a very tough seat in Matsikama, which is in the town of Van Reinsdorp, where many South Africans have been for flower season, in the Western Cape. They are going to have a very tough time defending that seat. And I tell you that because that is a party who if I was betting in political shares, I would invest in that party because it seems to me that they're going to grow in leaps and bounds. Having said that, it's one thing growing in leaps and bounds, and it's another thing holding on to a seat which you might have won in a local government election. But in the Nelson Mandela Bay election, there is the Bantu Integrity Movement. Now, this is a party led by Kuster Jack, which is a very well-known businessman in Gqeberha, in Nelson Mandela Bay. There was a lot of fanfare about his party going into the local government elections in 2021. They only ended up getting one seat. So you spoke about Songezo Zibi. The time is ripe for political alternatives in South Africa. It's clear that South Africans, like they did with Action SA, like they did with the Patriotic Alliance, like they did with traditional parties like the IFP and the Freedom Front, were looking to vote elsewhere in 2021. The challenge is, can you do well? Can you shake up enough of the electorate and enough of the voters to make a difference in South African politics? Are you going to have the potential of a Herman Mashaba and a Gauteng McKenzie, or are you going to struggle like Krista Jack did in Nelson Mandela Bay in 2021?
Nelson Mandela Bay is also such a complicated metro for other reasons. They've got the big water crisis at the moment, of course. But at the same time, it's a metro where the balance of power is very finely held. It's an ANC-led administration at the moment. But it seems to be very fragile. There was talk, and I think Helen Zille did confirm this as chair of the Federal Council of the DA, of what would be quite a big coalition. I think 9 parties, perhaps as many as that, would be trying to basically form a government instead of the ANC. Could today's by-election change the maths on that in any way?
Look, the ANC had a very tough election, to put it mildly, in 2021. One of the areas where its support largely held was in the Eastern Cape, and it was in Nelson Mandela Bay. ANC support there is incredibly sticky, and in Kwa-Nobuhle, their support went down by about 6 percentage points, from about 76% to 70% in between 2021 and 2019. I would expect it to fall somewhat today. I think they'll still hold the ward comfortably, but of course, you're 100% right. If the ANC had to lose the seat to the EFF today or to Action SA, that would be a total disaster for Mayor Eugene Johnson in Nelson Mandela Bay. That would mean that they would lose their fragile majority, and that the DA and other coalition parties would be able to take over that metro. And that would be a disaster for the ANC. I just don't see that happening because of election trends in places like Nelson Mandela Bay.
You talk about election trends, and I think many people have looked at last year's local election results, seen, for example, the ANC falling to, 37%, I think it was, in Gauteng in terms of share of the vote, 45% of the share of the vote in KwaZulu-Natal, 45% nationally, and immediately extrapolated that the ANC is going to lose 2024. Now, these are not the same elections. One's local, one's national, and then we mustn't forget there are 9 provincial elections, which are all run at the same time, but separately. They're separate elections. The trends are going in certain directions, sure, but do you extrapolate what we saw in the local elections last year, what we're seeing in by-elections this year, what we may see today, and sort of think that that's going to predict what will happen in 2024?
Yeah, I think by-election trends are becoming more and more relevant. There's a stronger correlation between what's happening in by-elections and what tends to happen in elections. There are a few caveats. So we had one of the ANC's big thorns in the side of the ANC in the last election were the local parties and the civic movements, which did very well in certain parts of the country. Those parties, I do not see the majority of them being on the ballots or doing well enough to win a seat in the elections. Maybe those voters will go back to the ANC. But I think in a place like Gauteng, it's clear that the ANC is in very big trouble, and they're going to have to do a hell of a lot. That's why the election of Panyaza Lesufi as Gauteng ANC leaders very important, because right now that is not traditionally it was the Western Cape, but right now the most vulnerable province out of the 9 provinces in South Africa is Gauteng, and by-election trends suggest that in places like Gauteng, in places like KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC has a lot of work to do in order to retain those provinces in 2024.
Wayne Sussman, thanks very much indeed, the elections expert. A lot to chew over, a lot to look forward to when the results come out later. We'll find out, of course, from the Electoral Commission, and then a lot to look forward to over the next couple of years now.